Have you ever just looked at a leather jacket, maybe a pair of shoes, or a handbag sitting in your closet and wondered, exactly where did this come from? Well, there's actually a very good chance its journey began in Bangladesh. But the story behind that leather, it's a fascinating, highly complex web of massive economic triumphs, serious environmental challenges, and some wild seasonal supply shocks. Okay, let's dive into this explainer and see how one of South Asia's most vital industries is trying to completely reinvent itself.
To untangle this whole multifaceted issue, we're going to break it down step by step. First, we'll look at the leather paradox. Then, we'll get into Eid, supply, and syndicates. Third, we'll examine the regional pressure. Fourth, the circular economy solution. And finally, we'll wrap up with a sustainable policy roadmap.
So let's start with Part 1, the leather paradox.
On one hand, you've got these massive economic triumphs. The leather sector is literally one of Bangladesh's key foreign exchange earners, pumping out a huge volume of exports bound straight for international markets like Europe and the US. I mean, it is an absolute economic golden goose. But then you have to look at the other side of the coin, which is the environmental toll. Traditionally, this industry has operated on a very linear take, make, pollute model. Historically, tanneries in places like the Hazaribagh leather industrial area have discharged untreated effluents and toxic chemicals directly into nearby water bodies. This intensive use of chromium-based chemicals in water, it heavily degrades local ecosystems and poses severe health risks to the surrounding communities.
And this brilliantly illustrates why we can't simply just shut the whole industry down to solve the pollution problem. Hundreds of thousands, that is the number of workers employed by the leather sector in Bangladesh, and that includes a very significant proportion of women and marginalized groups across both urban and rural areas. This massive employment footprint means that fixing these environmental issues isn't just about ecology, right? It's an urgent socioeconomic necessity.
Which brings us to Part 2, Eid, supply and syndicates.
Now, the primary raw material for this industry is obviously raw hide, and in Bangladesh, that supply is heavily tied to the Eid-ul-Adha festival. Millions of animals are sacrificed during this major Islamic celebration and creates a pretty wild timeline. About 3 weeks before the festival, demand for live animals surges, leading to speculative price hikes that really strain the tanneries. Then, literally 3 days after the festival, boom, there is this massive oversupply of raw hides hitting the market all at once, causing prices to completely plummet. By about 4 weeks later, the market finally starts to stabilize. But as you can imagine, this kind of chaotic price volatility makes strategic planning incredibly difficult. And that extreme volatility creates the absolute perfect environment for market intermediaries to step in. These intermediaries are known locally as syndicates. Basically, syndicates operate as powerful gatekeepers. They control the supply chain from the exact point of hide collection all the way to its sale to the tanneries. By colluding with slaughterhouses and transporters, they're able to monopolize the procurement process. This lets them artificially inflate costs for the tanneries and creates huge barriers for small and medium enterprises who honestly just lack the financial leverage to compete.
But the impact of these syndicates goes way beyond just pricing. When gatekeepers prioritize short-term quantity over careful processing, the actual quality of the raw hide drops significantly. Think about it. During the mass slaughtering of Eid, if those hides aren't preserved correctly and immediately, they get damaged. This lack of transparency and poor quality control actively works against waste minimization. It leads to way more waste in the tanning process and lowers the overall quality of the final leather products, which ultimately hurts Bangladesh's competitiveness on the global stage. It's exactly why digital platforms for direct procurement and pricing transparency are desperately needed right now.
Let's zoom out a bit for Part 3, the regional pressure.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how regional dynamics are heavily driving change here. Take a look at India. They act as both a competitor and a collaborator. India's leather industry is placing a huge, growing emphasis on sustainable practices, really focusing on waste minimization and resource recovery. By doing that, they're setting a regional benchmark that Bangladesh basically has to meet if they want to stay competitive. Then look at China. They are a massive importer of Bangladeshi leather, but they are aggressively investing in green tech. China has actually been closing down its own polluting tanneries and demanding strict green compliance from all its suppliers. So to keep their market access to China, Bangladesh literally has no choice but to adopt cleaner production methods.
That leads us to the hero of our story in Part 4, the circular economy solution.
The real solution to all of this lies in shifting to a circular economy. Remember that linear take, make, pollute model we talked about earlier? Well, a circular economy is the complete opposite. It emphasizes closed-loop systems. It's all about resource efficiency, minimizing waste at literally every step, and extending the product life cycle. Instead of just extracting resources and dumping toxic waste into rivers, the industry has to close the loop. They need to reuse materials and ensure that nothing goes to waste. So let's break down how this actually translates into practical, actionable steps on a tannery floor.
Here are the exact physical steps required to close that loop. Step 1, we have to substitute those hazardous traditional chemicals with eco-friendly biodegradable tanning agents. Things like vegetable tanning. Step 2, implement closed-loop water recycling. By utilizing advanced centralized effluent treatment plants, tanneries can actually treat and reuse their water rather than just dumping it out. Step 3 is absolutely crucial. Reclaim and reuse chromium. Using chrome recovery systems means less demand for virgin materials and way less hazardous waste. And step 4, this is truly fascinating, waste valorization. It involves taking solid waste, like leather trimmings, and extracting collagen from them to sell to the pharmaceutical and cosmetic industries. Suddenly, what used to be toxic sludge and scraps becomes a highly valuable secondary raw material.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, a sustainable policy roadmap.
Transitioning an entire national industry? That requires some seriously coordinated policy. First off, the government has to enforce stringent environmental regulations. But enforcement just isn't enough on its own. So the crucial point is this next step, creating green funds, tax breaks, and low-interest loans. You see, the vast majority of this sector is made up of small and medium enterprises. They simply don't have the capital to just go buy advanced chrome recovery systems out of pocket. They need financial support. Furthermore, integrating circular concepts into vocational training ensures the next generation of workers is actually ready for this shift. Fostering industry clusters lets small businesses share the hefty costs of joint waste management. And finally, promoting international standards like the Leather Working Group or LWG certification is what assures global buyers that these products are environmentally and socially responsible. At the very heart of this issue is a simple, powerful truth. Embracing circularity not only ensures the sustainable utilization of resources, but also drives economic resilience, social inclusion, and environmental stewardship. This matters so much because transforming the supply chain isn't just about saving rivers, although, let's be real, that is incredibly important. It's about protecting local ecosystems while simultaneously securing the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of people in a rapidly evolving global market.
Which leaves us with this final, pressing question. Will Bangladesh close the loop on its leather industry before it's simply too late? The next time you pick up a leather good, take a second to think about the immense journey, the wild seasonal supply shocks, and the environmental tightrope walked just to produce it. The roadmap to sustainability is clear, but the execution, that's what will define the future of Bangladesh's economy and its environment. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the life cycle of the things we use every single day